So what we're studying is like discourse communities. So to define that for you, I pull up this article that I used my assignment, and it defines discourse community as a group of people communicating with one another with common goals and interests. So what I already know about you is that you do college Democrats and that you are a bio major and hoping to go into medical school, which I'm sure you will. So, could you think of any other discourse communities that you're a part of? It could be like jobs, clubs, teams, etc.
Right. So I'm part of shadowing. I shadow a few different doctors on a
Okay.
weekly basis. So I'll be going through clinics and hospitals, speaking to patients and doctors about what they do in different conditions.
Okay.
And I'm also part of a pre-med club where we go to continuing medical education courses with doctors.
Oh, that's
And we
awesome.
sit for lectures and stuff
Okay.
like that.
Perfect. Okay. So, how does writing and like speaking and any other communication that you do work in these aspects of your life? So, can you elaborate specifically on what you do for College Democrats versus what you do for your classes?
Okay, so for College Democrats, as communications director, my job is to basically keep people engaged and keep people in the know about what's going on with our club.
Okay.
So we do policy discussions, and every week we have these meetings where we talk about the current things that we're doing and the future events that we're going to have, and we lead policy discussions on things like healthcare and immigration and school, like tuition-free college, things like that.
Awesome. Okay.
And also, it's my job at events to get people to come and join the club. So it's kind of like arguing for your own case, trying to learn more about the person and find out why they would be compatible, like with our club, and why it would be a good option for them.
That's great. So you get to explore like a bunch of different aspects of like communication and persuasion. That's great. Okay.
Yeah. And in terms of biology,
Mm-hmm.
like my major, a lot of scientific writing, which is basically trying to make your point in a precise and simple way.
Okay.
And without any fluff, and using a lot of technical terms, but making sure that the reader totally like understands what you're saying, to the point that you don't have to go back and look up a definition in order to know what's going on, say in like a lab report.
Okay.
So I write a lot of those.
Yeah. Can you give me an example of like something you would say so that the reader would understand? Just like anything that you've written.
Well, one example is a little presentation I had to do in my biology class where we named like a fun fact about any biological thing.
Okay.
So what I talked about were something that I feel like a lot of kids have had experiences with. Have you ever heard of sea monkeys?
Yeah.
So basically, they are marketed as these instant life pets. Okay. And the way that they actually work is you are given these 2 little packets to put into water to treat it. And your first packet is a nutrient packet, and the second one has the eggs.
Okay.
But what's really in the nutrient packet, other than nutrients, is a first set of eggs and a dye that develops over time. So that by the time you put in your second packet of eggs, those animals are immediately illuminated, so it looks like there is like instant life in the water.
Okay.
So that's interesting.
Yeah, because it's like not like a trick, but like advertising sort of. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you think, out of everything that you've listed so far, what do you think can possibly create challenges for you in terms of like your writing?
I think a big challenge that I have currently when it comes to my classes is writing from a personal perspective and from an argumentative perspective, rather than like straightforward to the point scientific writing, because I'm currently taking a class called Diverse Children's Literature, which is a lot of opinionated writing about like the way that you feel about things and a lot of cultural aspects. And I'm taking another class called Critical Issues in Public Health, where we talk about policy, like controversial policy. And you have to take a stance whether you agree with it or not and argue your position. And that's really difficult for me because there's not always a straightforward answer.
That's true. Yeah, but you get to like elaborate on like what you say. So you said that you also talk about policy in some of your classes. So do you feel like a strong connection? You can feel like you can use those strategies in College Democrats? How do you feel like they're connected?
I definitely think that a benefit of that critical issues class I'm taking is that, well, I have to write about things that I disagree with. Okay. And it's like randomly assigned to me. For example, okay. I am an advocate for medical marijuana, and I have to write against legalizing it.
Okay.
Which is difficult for me. But the benefit is that I can take all of this information and research that I gather to be able to play devil's advocate. So the next time I want to have a policy discussion on that, or another thing that we'll be talking about in the future of my class is conceal and carry and vaccine exemptions. Okay. So these are all things that I definitely have an opinion on, and I have to write on the opposite side of it. Okay. So the next time I have a conversation with someone who disagrees with me, I will know where they're coming from, and I will be able to argue my case even better.
Exactly. So you can be like, even though you have your stance, you can still be more objective, more educated, rather than someone who just like goes on. Okay.
Exactly.
I think that's such a benefit. Like
it's awesome.
Yeah. What challenges have you faced just in general as a writer, even outside of college? Just like any writing that you do, text messages, posts, college stuff, like what is your main challenge, do you think, over the course of your life?
I think writing papers is difficult for me in terms like making sure that everything flows. I think that is one of my biggest challenges perfectly throughout the entire piece, and that I have connections between one point and the next. I kind of think in like a choppy way. So it's like I'll throw up all of my thoughts onto a piece of paper, and I don't really know like how to formulate them. What I want to talk about, but I don't know like how to put it on paper in an organized way.
Yeah.
So I need like help with that for sure.
So do you feel like scientific writing kind of gives you an out for that? Like, do you feel like it's easier to write that way rather than what you have trouble with?
I definitely think it is, because there's like a point that you're trying to make. For example, like if there's an experiment, you have one goal, you have a prediction and a hypothesis. It's either proven or disproven, and you have your results right there. So it's really easy to talk about.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. So I pretty much asked you that already. Okay. So what obstacles have you faced in writing for your major versus preparing for medical school? So you have to take certain courses for your major, but you also have to take certain courses for like the specified medical school that you want to go to. So what challenges have you faced in terms of writing for that specifically?
Honestly, I feel like my general major courses help me in terms of the facts, you know, like for organic chemistry, biology, biochem, like all these classes I'm going to take, and I'm going to have the knowledge. But I think a lot of the problem that doctors have is that like communication. So I think it's really important for a medical professional to be able to take what they know and explain it in a way that makes sense to others.
Right.
And honestly, I think that college Democrats and just like being an extroverted person helps me with that. Because I love to talk to people, and communicating is something that I have a strength in. So I think that being able to differentiate and knowing the times where you talk in your like doctor way with all of your big terms versus talking on like a normal base level with another person who may not have the knowledge that you have. I think being able to key into that when you need to is kind of difficult. And also, medical terminology is not something that is widely practiced in the general biology classes. And I'm not into my concentration yet enough to be in like anatomy and physiology. Like I'm not there yet, so that's definitely a block. I feel it.
Okay. Well, but all right, so could you describe for me like a general day, like a general meeting in College Democrats? So like how does each meeting vary? What is different? What is the same?
Okay, so every Monday we meet at the same time in the same place, and we come in and we say, you know, hello. If there are any new people, we thank them for coming and introduce our officers that we have. And we go through the same motions of talking about the current events, the things that are coming up, the opportunities that we want them to be involved in, and our future events. So that is always going to be, like, that structure is always going to be solid. And then we go on to policy. But it's, like, the substance that varies every once in a while. For example, like, a few weeks ago, the city of St. Petersburg had a climate march. So one week we were talking about how we want everybody to show up for that.
Okay.
And this last week we asked for volunteers to come help us build poster boards for our next event. So there are always different things that we try to use to keep people involved in the community and in our club. But yeah, those things vary, and the policy discussions are different every week.
Okay. So you get to have different types of communication either way. So like with the posters, you have to figure out like how to advertise to different people and like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's definitely always varying. So that's great because you're using your skills in different ways. Okay. So why do these experiences that you've had matter to you? What makes them like the first thing to come to your mind when I ask you these questions? Like what is significant in each of those experiences?
Well, both of them take up a lot of my time.
That's true.
And these are the two things that I'm very passionate about, like the medical field and science. I love to learn about, and I think it's super interesting. And in terms of politics, it's something that wasn't really a part of my life before, but now that it is, I see it as a really key part of being involved in your community as a citizen and being involved as an American citizen, like
That's
in
true.
our nation. I think that knowing what's going on and exercising your rights is like really important, and so many people don't know about that. So I think that passion definitely helps drive me in my communication as well. But that's probably why those two things come to mind.
So what made you fall in love with like science and biology in particular?
Honestly, I hate history. I don't know what it is about it.
I get that.
And writing has always been, like, I kind of liked it, kind of haven't. You know, I never really felt any type of way.
Yeah.
And I always did well in those classes, but science classes in high school and middle school always challenged me and pushed me to pay attention and to try harder and to listen and study, you know? And I feel like if I picked some profession where I wouldn't have to try, then I would just be bored.
Yeah, exactly. You wouldn't like love what you're doing. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. I had another question, but like I forgot. So it was like off the top of my head. Okay, so let's see. So when you're writing one of your Instagram posts or you're creating a flyer, can you walk me through like your thought process? Like, you know, the kind of like the types of words that you choose, like your sentences.
Okay.
Like how does all those advertising aspects, like how do you pull those together, basically?
So I like to start out with like picking out like a picture. For example, the climate strike. Like we did this march, and so I went out and I found the logo of the climate march that has been going on internationally. And when I like make my post, I like to think about something that would make me as a viewer stop to look at what it is that they're doing. And I've always really enjoyed seeing social media accounts that use a lot of like GIFs and drawings and something colorful and like different fonts and writing, like something to catch my attention, but not something that is too lengthy to where like I wouldn't want to sit and read it all if I just had a moment to look at my phone.
Right.
So I try to be quick about what it is that I have to say. And if I have a lot to say, I try to split it up into different posts, but I like to have things like colorful and lots of stickers and stuff like that.
Perfect. Yeah, so you're appealing to just any age group, really. So you're not just appealing just to college students. Okay, great. Okay. So when you sit down to like start a lab report, how like also walk me through this thought process basically. What do you do for just any lab report? What do you do beforehand, during, and after? And how does that implement, you know, the skills of writing that you have?
Okay, so scheduling is definitely important because you have to do, well, in my classes, you have to do a pre-lab and a post-lab. So the pre-lab is basically reading all of the things that you have to do and preparing yourself and having a good understanding of what it is that the lab is going to be doing and the key concepts that are being like implemented. So it's about, I mean, mostly reading and then understanding the procedure and being able to work those into your own words so you can come into the lab and know what you have to do without sitting and reading through the whole thing. And when you do those, like the pre-labs, so basically you're just stating your hypothesis, which is pretty straightforward, and writing the procedures in your own words and doing like a few assignments. But when it comes to the post lab, you have to do an introduction. So you have to understand what it is that the lab is asking for exactly, but you also have to know and find any background information that a random reader would need in order to understand the lab that was taking place. So you have to do research and rearranging a little bit, but it's pretty brief and simple. And then you write down the procedures, which again is straightforward, and you have to analyze your results. So you put down your results and you talk about them in the discussion. So you look at all of the data you've gathered and you have to ask yourself, what conclusion does this come to? Does this prove my hypothesis or does it not? And regardless of that, what errors have I encountered in this experiment? So like, is this data legitimate, and can I really come to this conclusion based off of the things that happened when I was in the lab? You know, just to say like if they're accurate or inaccurate.
Yeah, because like for writing a paper, you could just cite a source incorrectly or just whatever, but like labs, you could have like this margin of error, so it's definitely something you have to think about.
Exactly.
So for college Democrats, of course you try to stay as objective as you can, even though you guys do have your own stance, but what am I trying to say?
Like, how do I like mediate?
Basically,
or, like,
yeah. How do you say middleman as communications director? Like, how do you mediate everybody else, basically?
Well, it's kind of funny because I feel like even all of the other officers aside from me have very strong stances and are very headstrong when it comes to like proving their points. And I definitely am an opinionated person and have my own stances on a lot of topics, but I understand that I may not be educated enough to come up with a firm stance on some things. So it's easier for me to take a back seat and observe and see where people are coming from, which makes it a lot easier for me to carry on a conversation because I can tell if people are getting carried away with one side when somebody else is trying to make a point. And I think it's just about reading the room and like seeing who really has something to say, or seeing if anyone is offended by anything that somebody else is saying. I think it's just about like reading that and being able to say, okay, let's move on to another topic, or cut somebody off and call on another person, because sometimes that's necessary.
Yeah, sometimes people get out of line. So, you basically, I had something else on my mind to say, but, you know, I'm going to forget. What was I going to say? So, basically, yeah. Okay, thank you, I'll be right out. I completely lost that, but anyway. So, let's see. So, in terms of, like, having to mediate and what you just said, okay, you know what, just... My professor's gonna watch this and be like, wow, you're such a train wreck. Anyway. So, what can you tell me about College Democrats itself, and, like, how has it contributed to all of your literacy experiences? So, all of, like, the nonverbal communication that you've done. So, like, basically reading the room is what I was gonna say. How do you think all of that contributes to strengthening your skills? Whether it's in writing a lab report, or talking to somebody on the street, or mediating the meeting. Like, how do you think all of that ties into itself?
I think that it is definitely helping me to be neutral in a situation, even if I have a strong opinion on something, which is something that I think a lot of young people have trouble with.
Oh, yeah.
And it's definitely educated me, and it's helped me to be able to see things on other sides of the spectrum. And I feel like a more educated person altogether on, like, political and social topics. And I just think that it's helped me get out of my shell a little bit in a way of being able to, like, reach out to people that I may not normally reach out to try and get engaged in, like, school activities, which is, like, something that I was not really involved my freshman year of college. So being the person that's trying to go out and get those types of people involved is a challenge. But I think that it's definitely useful in terms of me being able to roll with the punches and try to be creative, but accept it if I can't get somebody on board, you know?
Yeah, of course, because you can only do so much. But definitely has more of like a personal benefit for you. It has a lot of personal benefits for you, actually.
Right.
So it's great that you can like benefit your academic life, but also you as a person and your mindset. So that's great. So basically, you walked me through a day in College Democrats. Now can you walk me through a typical day, like any day out of your week, basically for your major? So how does, let's see, it's all in the context of writing. So basically, oh shoot.
Since I was already talking about labs, I guess I'll start there. Okay. So, you know, I told you about the pre-lab and post-lab aspect, but when you go into class, you got to know what you're doing. You get out your materials, take a quiz, and work together with your lab partners to go throughout the procedure, which all of us should know at that point. So that's pretty straightforward. But in terms of my lectures, taking a lot of notes, and sometimes doing group stuff, which isn't really often in most of my science classes, but in my biology class, I'm put together in groups to do like little projects. For example, we just had to do like a cell presentation, like about different parts of the cell. And so that's lecture. And in my diverse children's literature class, I had to participate in a lot of online discussions about children's literature and different aspects. Like culture was the thing that we most recently touched on, and how prejudice and discrimination and stereotyping can contribute to like single stories and give like bad reputations to certain groups of people. So talking about stuff like that. And in critical issues and public health, we debate policy topics. So we try to look at it from a bunch of different perspectives, from a bunch of different groups, and how that one thing can affect all of those people differently.
So how do you feel like your discussions in your children's literature class and your critical thinking, how do you think the skills that you learned there, how do you feel like that applies to your science classes? Like, how do you feel the two are connected?
I feel like it definitely helps me look at things from a more holistic perspective, because I feel like I said, with pre-med students and medical students having problems with like communication and stuff like that, I feel like it's just they're less well-rounded in terms of like communication and being able to see different sides of things. Because the mindset of like a science major is to be like straightforward, and there is one answer to everything, you know? So being able to, it helps me to be able to see that a lot of things are more multifaceted than I thought they were.
Yeah. So do you feel like now that you have like a more dimensional like worldview, like do you feel like that really makes you feel connected between science and College Democrats, since they're basically on different poles?
Oh, yeah. This critical issues in public health class, I had no idea it was going to be so, like, policy-based. I didn't think it was going to be talking about, like, current stuff and, like, politics and stuff like that. Like, it's very heavy on that, and it happens to be one of my options for exit requirements, which I thought was really interesting. But I feel like it should be something that should be necessary and integral for biomed majors. You know, I feel like that would be a really important class for everyone to take.
I think so too. Let's see. So tell me about the kinds of technology that you use to like for College Democrats and for all of your science classes. So basically like Instagram or Alex or like whatever artificial intelligence that you have.
Right. Okay. So well, I definitely use Instagram and Facebook for like all things social media when it comes to College Democrats. And I use like Word and Excel a ton for my labs and my writing for my classes. But I mostly take notes by hand and make like charts and study guides by hand, just because it's like a form of active learning, which really helps me to be able to remember all of these things, because it's like super important for me to carry all of this information with me onto my next classes, since it's so foundational.
So how do you feel like taking notes by hand, how do you feel like putting everything that you're learning into your own words? Like, okay, what am I trying to say? How do you feel like that makes you think more about what you're saying? Like, do you use more symbols? Do you use like acronyms or like shortened phrases? Like
Yeah,
shorthand.
all of that.
Okay.
I use all of that. But yeah, active learning is really important in any type of memorization. If
I agree.
you really want to learn anything that you're learning, it's super important to paraphrase and stuff like that. And I think that helps a lot too, even with scientific writing, because you should not be using direct quotes in your scientific writing.
Okay.
So being able to paraphrase seemingly simple things like that is super helpful with that too.
Okay. So a lot of people are under the impression that paraphrasing is just like changing a couple of things. So how do you specifically go through the process of paraphrasing?
Well, I go through a few processes. So, I mean, the professor for my lectures has already kind of paraphrased the information necessary from the textbook. So it's kind of about simplifying it even further from there if you can.
Okay.
And saying, like, when I look at my notes and when I, like, listen to lectures, I think to myself about how I would try to explain it to another person.
Exactly. And, like, a lot of the writing that we have to do in my class is, like, trying to explain it to somebody else, so that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So what kind of writing do you think goes into the creation of these technologies that you're using? How do you feel like the font at the top of the Instagram page is a little cursive, or, like, how do you feel that how the stories are arranged and, like, the shapes that they use, like, they're displayed in circles? How do you feel all of that communicates what it's intended to communicate to users?
I think that a lot of it is to catch the eye and to emphasize importance. Like, for example, like even just bold lettering and underlining, like to highlight certain important things. And I think repetition is also important.
Okay.
For example, like for all of the actual like Instagram posts I make that stay, in my captions, I still repeat what it is that's in the picture, just in case like somebody's just scrolling through. Like everybody's gonna look at either one thing or the other first. So I want to have that information in both places.
Okay. So let's go back a couple years, and can you describe to me the influence on your development and your experience, like learning how to read and write? Did you teach yourself more than your parents or your teachers, or how did that come to be?
Honestly, when I was like really young, I was homeschooled, and my mom was really good about making sure that she read to me a lot and that I was writing and drawing. And I think that's all super important and definitely helped me. The times that I was more into reading, that was for sure helpful to my communication and writing skills, but I was not super into it all the time. But I think that a few of my high school professors really encouraged me and would like hype me up and be constructive in terms of my writing for some of my English classes. And again, I think that the challenge is also part of it in terms of like some of it got really difficult towards like senior year when I was taking these advanced level classes for dual enrollment credits, and I would have to do a lot of writing, and I think that practice makes perfect, and having to do that over and over and over again has definitely helped me.
All right. I don't have anything really else written to talk to you about, but what am I thinking?
Trying to see if you can think of something else.
About that yawn. Yeah, I'm like trying to like go off or something on my own. I think that's all I have for you. So thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah,
you're awesome.
Of course.
All right, and then I will definitely let you know when the second one is. That's gonna be more focused, I think, on college Democrats. I still have yet to format the questions. But that is due in about 2 weeks, so I'll shoot you a text probably next week to get that scheduled because I know you're a busy lady. So thank you so much again, Katie. I'll talk to you soon.
Of course.
All
yes.
right.
Good luck. Let me know if you have any more questions.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much.
No problem. I'll talk to you later.
Okay. Bye, girl.
Bye.